Welcome back to the Low APM Challenge, where I try to teach you that StarCraft is about playing smarter and not harder, by moving up through the leagues with less actions per minute than the average player, but hopefully more meaningful ones. Yes, we're back to Zerg, the least popular by a relatively large margin of the three races to start out. Now, why? Because they're slimy, disgusting, they have an uncomfortable amount of appendages. That's never stopped anyone before. Well, in general, the Zerg are so significantly different than Terran and Protoss that I think a lot of newer players are intimidated. And it is a little harder to pick it up. There are a lot of new mechanics, especially if you've never played StarCraft before. Between your hatchery being your only production facility, only needing one tech building, queens, and also other queens, and all their implications. We actually struggled in the first episode, of course up against some significantly higher level than expected players, but at the same time, playing Zerg is just a lot of mechanics, a lot of housekeeping, and we're going to double down today as not even to silver yet, but basic scouting, drones, not drones, overlords. When are we getting all these things and why? On top of reinforcing a basic build, avoiding bad habits like building Zerglings for the sake of it, putting static defense down at the wrong time in the wrong place. We've already got the basics of queens and larvae, and respecting your larva, such an important thing. And respecting the people who choose to support. Thank you. So with that, today, the challenge, should I choose to accept it, which I already have, based on over 3 million games last year, these are the counts. This is at least 10 APM less than the average for each league, with a huge sample size. 60 APM, okay, bronze is a slight asterisk as the rank bug last year skewed it, so we're just being consistent. But starting at silver, 60 for bronze, 75 for silver, 90 for gold. I don't think we're at risk of getting much further past that today. In fact, the goal today will be silver 1, but we'll see how long it takes to get there, starting from bronze. And we've got a lot of questions as well that you guys asked both in the chat and in the comments. I will be answering during the break and maybe at the end. We got things like, is it possible to weaponize creep? Or, Winter, you just trailed off while explaining an important point. Or, you have too many right clocks. And so much more we'll be going over. So without further ado, that's enough of the intro. We're going to skip over anyways. Like, subscribe, and it's time to start. And now we could be waiting in the queue for a minute or two, but... or not, because this is StarCraft.
If you want win, don't relax.
Alright, versus Terran. Set up those camera location hotkeys as we went over for injects especially. I'm still going to be using the camera location injects. My second overlord against Terran is going to go scout my third and then stay at it. We're going to be starting to get more specific overlord locations, because that is, while you can use a similar like hatchery first build against Terran, Protoss, and Zerg, your overlords need to do slightly different things. This is partially because of what they're vulnerable to and partially what they're up against. For example, against Zerg, the only option to kill overlords early is our queens. And queens don't do so great off a creep, much to their dismay. So you can send more overlords across the map and they won't be at risk. But if you send too many OVs across the map for ostensibly scouting against Protoss, or even against Terran, they run the risk of being picked off by like a Viking or Marines or a Void Ray. In fact, Void Ray very common, so usually just sending one Overlord to the other side is going to get me the basic info. Making more drones. At 20, I'm going to make Overlord 3. This one is going to go right out front. My first Overlord, this is scouting. It's scouted for proxy Rex. That's what I was looking for there. At 2 minutes, we're going to add on a gas geyser here as well. I'm not doing... I may get Zergling speed, but we're not rushing it. That's the point here. Get one set of Zerglings, shift one off of the eggs, and we'll set this rally point. Oh, this Overlord went a little too far, but we're going to go to the pervert pillar over there. Most maps have something like that for that Overlord to hide at until at least there's air units to deal with it. Looks like the Marine is chasing. And since he doesn't have anything out there, I'm going to send those 4 Zerglings across. Yep, the little biolab. Apparently it's a high ground despite the fact we're under the sea. Don't worry about it. Don't question it. Alright, start those injects. Gonna build more queens. And a couple more overlords. So I control click the eggs that I built overlords on. I'm gonna right click one, shift click, and then right click over here. So this should cover all those air paths. But I don't want them to be too far out, just in case there's something like a Viking. Alright, so now we're scouting up the ramp. The intent of this is to get... Well, alright. Scouting and drones. Scouting and drones. It's like scout and probe. Scouts and probes, scouts and drones. 2 favorite Counter-Strike maps. What does he have? He has a factory. He's got an engineering bay. This is your classic Bronze League Heroes setup. So, I'm not too worried about anything right now. I'm going to have one of those queens for inject, shift 2. I usually like having at least, well, pretty much 1 queen for injecting, and then you just keep building queens. But he is on 1 base. So, oh wait, I'm not on my Zerg hotkeys. Ugh, Protoss, disgusting. Looks like we're good to go. Which means I have lair on the F key. I tried to click it, it didn't work. I immediately tried to figure that out. And while he doesn't have a starport, that's irrelevant. He's on 1 base. And you know what time it is? It's 4:20. So even if you see a starport or something coming out, maybe you build them earlier. But we're getting in the habit of building those spore crawlers to have some basic anti-air in a timely manner without building them so early that it hurts our economy. Because every time, even though spore crawlers are 75 minerals, they also cost a drone. So they're actually the most expensive static defense of all the races. Because that drone mines minerals. It costs 50 minerals. So a spore crawler is actually 125. And then another about 50, 60 minerals every minute. Because it's no longer mining. So it's actually quite an expensive structure. Alright, we got a lot of minerals here. And build a few more overlords. Control, right click, evolution chambers by 6 minutes. I'm going to build an overseer and send it into his base. Because Zerg does require a little more scouting than the other races. Why? Because you don't have as many built-in one-size-fits-all units. Like, queens are good for defense, and I should actually just be building more. I have the money. Gonna get a few roaches as well. I need to get 50 drones. What am I doing? Hovering over the supply. So there's a chance he has a hidden base somewhere. But kind of the point of what we're doing is if he is on 1 base, we're fine. And if he tries anything weird and crazy, we're still fine. And if he has Mass Viking, we continue to be fine. Vikings, fun in the campaign. when you get the like the range and the AoE missiles, they're quite good. So that's why a lot of the very numerous Terran players will get Vikings, because in the campaign they are quite strong. But against players in multiplayer, especially Zerg, they are not as strong. So the counter here is just having queens and a few units. So now I'm gonna go up to the final number, which is gonna be 70 drones. And keep building some more. Taking a very painful look around. I'm gonna send a roach. Shift click on the minimap, right click, shift, right click to go look at the outlying bases. There's only so many bases, but we're gonna get to 70 drones. That's about 70. I'm gonna get these gas geysers. Let's queue up a couple injects. And throw that hatch. So, we saw that SCV there. Let's see if he has this base. He does. So, what do we do about that? What we do is we sit back and we build a bunch of Roach Hydra. And get supply block. Well, now we build a bunch of Overlords. And then we build a bunch of Roach Hydra. And we A-click. That's the plan. I'm gonna get the 2-2 upgrades. Put those Evo chambers on the same key. So that way I can use the tab key. Sometimes you have to tab a couple times because the hive has access. Well, it will tab between the hatchery and the lair. So that is something. You do have to tab one more time. The Hydralisk speed upgrade. Building more Hydras. Alright. Right click, shift, 1, 2, 3. Right click, shift, 1, 2, 3. And then come right on back. 3 in each gas. A couple more OVs so I can max out. Before 10 minutes, I'm working towards a hive. We're gonna get an Overseer as well. Let's get some roaches. You don't need too many. 1-to-1 is fine. So, a lot of people ask, like, what if there's a bunch of tanks or something? Well, then, we're gonna get Vipers. That's the plan. The units that we're slowly going to work on adding in are Lurkers and Vipers. Though, you shouldn't need that much of the time. Honestly, it's just a quantity over quality situation. The problem is a lot of your units get easily distracted. They'll start attacking depots, they'll attack a planetary, they don't have high ground. All this makes it annoying. Start that hive. There's a lot of things that can potentially go wrong. Let's get some more injects. I'm actually running out of larvae here. So creep spread is not the first priority. Like, to be honest, with Zerg, I definitely have to slow it down. Because otherwise my APM is going to go over the top. The last priority, if I have to cut one thing out, it is creep spread. Creep spread is very good, but I'd rather, for every creep tumor, if I'm missing 10 supply of units, it's not worth it. So, that is kind of something you add in when you're already spending your money or your larva and stuff like that. It is the last priority, but it is a priority. It's definitely on the list. It's not unintentional I don't creep spread. It's just we're cutting that part out to focus on what's important. Alright, the hive is done. I'm going to start hive tech upgrades. I'm going to inject. I'm just control clicking these queens.
Someone wants to see the full power of the swarm.
And select all army now. Yes, for this, control 1 and A click. So if I get stopped by something like tanks on the high ground, pretty much the only thing, you know what? Why am I going for his main? We know he has this base. It's better to go for the outlying bases first. Even if it's a planetary, because many players will not have many defenses. Ideally, Hydras are not in front, but here we are. We'll see. If I see tanks, just one tank, that's fine. So I'm gonna right click one time and then A click. That allows me to get in range. Just one right click, not a bunch. A click. The point is, every time you right click, your units have a chance to trip over one another as well. So if you can avoid spamming it, like, it's not bad, but it's better to just get within range. Since it was only one tank, I went up the ramp. If it was more than one tank, I would probably sit back and build the Vipers.
Time to celebrate victory.
Oh. No! As you see, even with cutting out a whole lot, the Zerg just injecting is like 10 APM. When you have enough hatcheries, because you inject twice a minute, just about, and it requires selecting the queen and then clicking on the hatch. So 3 hatches, that's 6x. Well, yeah, it's about right. That's math, right? So we did fail. The 60 is difficult, I will say, but you could, of course, that army, even if it was a minute or two later, very likely would have been perfectly fine. Like, as you could tell, he didn't have the overwhelming unit count. So
Good. Now I have your attention.
Wonder Gaming is now chilling.
how generous of this fellow. So that's apparently gifting 1 sub. Makes it about me.
The strongest, the enemy fought well.
And that's how you do it. That's how we get, can I have a gifted sub? I'll stick around and hope I fail. We made it. We unlocked 75 actions per minute. For some reason, I got plus 105 from that guy. So it looks like the MMR... Yeah, so this is reinforcing my point. I don't think I said it during the Zerg series very much. But what I recommend is if you feel like... You have to play 25 games or so. 25 games is your actual placement matches. Which should put you less than... the actual amount of MMRU, not your opponent. Your opponent does not factor in how much they gain or lose. Once you have between 20 and 30 or so a game, that's when the system's pretty confident where you are. Until then, you're still in your placement matches. Even if it says you placed into something, bronze, silver, gold, whatever, it's lying. Would you trust any system that took 5 random opponents and is like, this is your league? Yes, the ranking system is quite convoluted, but the only thing that really matters is that number. And when that number fluctuates by a couple hundred a game, it's not very confident yet. So what I recommend is if you get to the point where you're at like less than 50 MMR gained or lost per game, and you still feel like you're in the wrong league, probably too high, you leave league, and you can retake your placement matches. It doesn't reset your MMR, but it can give you a more accurate league. Yeah, I see a lot of... well, I saw several comments just in general about, I played my placement matches and it was terrible and I got stomped. And then I placed into gold. It's like, yep. So sometimes it's not very good about finding where you're supposed to be after 5 matches. So that's my recommendation. At the end of the day, though, all that really matters is that MMR number. The league is not actually directly tied to it for several reasons, some of which I don't understand. There's been bugs in the past, which is why we can't trust the bronze APM stats, because last year there were some Masters players who 4K, 5K MMR who placed into bronze. And just because there's balance in all things, some of those bronze players apparently had a Masters border. Like, so what I'm saying is, you can't always trust it. Also, important to note, there's different MMR for each race. So when you play Zerg, you're at a different number than up against your Depot Tarrant. That is a creative opener. So when you see this, what you have to understand is he's now spent as much as a command center on supply... Oh, that's a missile turret. Alright. Realize 45% of bronze and 40% of silver is Terran. And those Terrans, many of them, fresh off the campaign. And in the campaign, as we saw last game as well, Vikings, static defense, all amazing. You, my Zerg friend, sure, there might be games where you go up against someone who actually has an idea, like a plan. I'm getting 2 gas because I was late. But no, eventually, you should be hitting some of these. It's nice to see Bronze League heroes in the wild as well. Like, I'm going to take their ladder points. But the thing is, a true Bronze League hero, well, in bronze, I don't know, like, is the people who do what we're watching on the other side, they're not able to tell how badly they lost. Some people might lie to you and be like, I know how bad I got stomped. No. Only the people who have a little more experience, then they have the perspective to know, oh, I'm actually getting obliterated right now. Like those games when it's like, it's weird. I felt like I was losing and then 12 battle cruisers jump in. Those kind of games. But that takes some experience to get to. Oh, it only gets worse, guys. Don't worry. So, oh, he has a bunker. Well, so the counter to what he has right there is ignoring him and moving on with my life. I'm gonna get a Roach Warren, 2 Evo Chambers. Do you go for 4 queens, then lair, or 3 queens plus lair? I wouldn't put a number on it. Usually I'm aiming to produce queens off of at least 2 hatcheries at once. And start a lair by 5 minutes. Obviously, that can be adjusted. I actually, like, when I say I wouldn't put a number on it, that's true. Like, I missed Spore 20. I was too distracted by his amazing defenses. But essentially, most of the time you'll have the minerals if you're not building like static defense or a bunch of Zerglings too early. So you can kind of continue queen production with at least 2 hatches most of the time. Most of the time you should have those minerals, especially like you see, we're not always on top of it. I don't mind having a couple queens for inject on some of these hatches either. So, if you've ever watched Bronze League Heroes, though, you know all roads lead to Battlecruiser. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to go for Aspire. What is the counter to battlecruiser? Not mutas. We are not making mutas. No. I want to stress this. We are not. Yes, you'll beat some players because they don't know how to walk and stim their marines at the same time. But corruptors, they do extra damage to massive air. Motherships, Tempests, your mother, broodlords, battlecruisers. Like, they are designed to kill those. The reason why usually they're not the unit composition is because obviously they're not great against like marines, void rays, stuff like that. But they are the anti-air unit. Now, I'm not stereotyping, and by that I mean I'm totally stereotyping. I expect there to be 2 starports of battlecruisers in this base, and I don't even know if I'll be able to get in. So we're just gonna make one more round of drones. Once I'm at 70, I'd say just fill out your larva. 70 is a very nice number. You probably, if you're actually playing it around this APM, won't be able to spend your money if you have comfortably mining bases with over 70 drones. The struggle will be to keep up with the larva more than it will to get enough money. Because remember, hatcheries are your production. It's like having more barracks. Okay.
Mineral field exhausted. Time to mass expand and defenses. Evolution. Your army mutated.
We had 2 starports. I'm actually, so I wanna start using this tip. I didn't mind this tip at all. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna patrol an overlord between the outlying bases here. So this was a recommended tip for looking at the minimap. So the idea is your eye will just be drawn to that side of the, oh my god. Your eye will be drawn to the side of the map. Even if there's nothing there. Of course, there are some beneficial side effects as well, potentially. So, as we know, the best place is the only place most players at this level. That's why, as Terran and Protest, I'm like, we're gonna take it at the actual 3rd base, guys. Because out of sight, out of mind. But this one, unfortunately, is in sight. So, very much in my mind. But that's part of the benefit is that more often than not do players try this at bronze and silver, especially Terrans, because their buildings can fly. How OP is that? And also, so that way you just have something on the minimap to draw your eye. I literally have no better tips. I think about it. It's a really hard thing to train. Just like looking at the minimap, especially if there's nothing there most of the time. So I like the idea of patrolling. Now, if you're Terran or Protoss, maybe patrolling not an Overlord, but just like an SCV or a Probe. I think that's a pretty good habit to get into. I think that's the best way to... That's the best suggestion I've heard about patrolling. Or to train yourself to look at the minimap. Alright, so I'm going to get 2 rows of Corruptors. Control-click. Control-3. So I like to put my army... This is the same. I have the same scheme for Terran, Zerg, and Protoss because I play random. I got to play 9 different matchups. Having like a different hotkey scheme and setup for every matchup would be insane because you can't have different. You'd have to even switch your hotkeys each time. But I like to put my main army on 1, just like your whatever the hammer is to beat them down with goes on 1. So you got your roaches and overseer here. For Zerg, so on 2 is my auxiliary units, essentially. Whether it's a support unit like a Warp Prism or a Raven, or for Zerg, it's a little bit more clear-cut. It's Queens. That's my Queen hotkey. Or at least the Fighting Queens. Which sounds like a mediocre high school basketball team. The Fighting Queens. It's like, is that a little offensive? Yeah, we get a lot of technical fouls. Like, not...
exhausted.
Okay.
Time to make expand and defensive.
Nine matchups. That doesn't sound right. All right. So we're gonna do the math. So each race has 3 matchups. There are 3 races. Okay. I can even do it on my hands. All right. Yeah. 9. So technically, and actually practically, you have 9 different build orders. But having the same sort of scheme, for spectators, it's only 6. Stop outing yourself, guys. Just because 3/4 of you haven't played a ladder game of StarCraft either in a year or ever doesn't mean you have to treat it like that's literally the only way to enjoy the game.
It should have
We're
happened.
pretending that at least a few dozen of you will play one. This is like, I don't know. My mom, yes, that one, is a grade school teacher. The youngins. So some of that, like, I grew up. I was young once,
No more
many
minerals
moons
in the
ago. But so essentially, what she would do is great teacher, very cares very much, gets paid less than me, of course. After 20 years, more than 20 years, almost 30 now. Very sad, but she really does care. But what happens is she would come home and still impart all these lessons on me and all that, but also she'd talk shit about the kids. Like, little Bobby over there he's smart. He's really smart, but he acts up. Sometimes, and that's what teachers do. So I learned from that. 1, how to deal with grade school kids, aka Twitch chat, and how to talk shit, aka Twitch chat. So I really got to thank her for that. And thus, the educational series here. As we worked it out. Little Bobby, though, needs to stop. Like, he keeps writing on his desk and not paying attention. He's distracting the whole class. Damn it, Bobby. I won't go there.
It should have happened. Your minerals is ended.
Alright, so there was So, did you notice the Overlord just hanging out? It spotted that medevac, and now the medevac is gone. I think it came home after it saw the Overlord. Anyways, so he's on 2 bases. We're gonna go for Broodlords. We're gonna go for the actual Siege Breakers. I usually would say just Vipers with Roach Hydra, but when he has such a cinematic setup like this,
You have exhausted all the minerals.
you can't come up. You can't go up that ramp. Like, there are games where you might not be quite as prepared as you think you are, and you run the risk of them winning a fight so hard you can't rebuild in time.
No more
So
minerals
the siege unit, they're Broodlords. Yeah, they're not as good as they once were, like in Wings of Liberty, but that's still how you break this sort of setup. And before I go Broodlords, we're gonna take all of the other bases here. No, I'm limiting myself. I don't think you need compositions with more than 1 extra unit. I'm calling it an advanced unit. That doesn't necessarily mean a spellcaster. But here, Broodlords are going to be my extra unit. Having Vipers and Broodlords and Roach Hydra and Corruptors, sure, that'd be good. But I have Roach Hydra, Broodlord, and then whatever Corruptors are left over will help protect. I don't think you need to try to add all this in at once. Like, just a dozen or so. Like, Broodlords are only very good if you have at least 5. 4 Broodlords are sad. They're very sad. It's not like battle cruisers. Okay, 1 Broodlord over there, like, throwing broodlings out while Marines get out-healed by a medevac. Like, so it's important to note there are 2 attacks for Broodlords. The actual damage from Broodlords comes from air attack. It is the Broodling Strike. It's when you whip the Broodlings into their face. That is the real damage. That's for breaking the sieges. The Broodlings themselves are good for fighting the army. The Broodlings do damage as they nibble on everything, but the actual damage dealt is when the Broodlings first, like, launch their drop pod or whatever it is they're due.
Time to make expand and defensive.
Now, not like you need particularly good upgrades. I'm just pointing out it's essentially a two-part attack. Notice how broodlings are just broodlords who will never grow up. Only corruptors. Alright, well, let us begin the attack. I expect there to be a significant amount of air units, so we'll move underneath. Yes, the broodlings are affected by melee attack and carapace, but that's essentially irrelevant. The actual damage really comes. That's why you'll see pro players, they'll launch the broodlings and micro back. Like, because they just want to get the impact damage most of the time. Control clicking the corruptors. Now that we've broken most of the siege, we can move in with the rest of the army. The benefit of the Broodlords is that it turns the siege tanks and Widow Mines against the Terran. So siege tanks and Widow Mines go from being incredibly annoying to hurting the Terran more than the Zerg. Only like players like Maru will reliably unsiege their tanks or unburrow. So the two units that are the most annoying to deal with usually with your ground army are shut down by Broodlords. Now, Broodlords have their own weaknesses. Probably the key one is they don't shoot up. Like, they only are anti-ground. So, obviously, you have to make sure you don't overcommit and die to 12 Vikings. So, when Vipers, when Broodlords. Broodlords are a finisher, alright? They're essentially like an execute. I don't think in most games you should use Broodlords unless you're essentially out of options. Like, for some reason you have Corruptors or all that. Like, if he wasn't sitting on two bases with a bunch of bunkers on the top of his ramp, I probably would have gone Vipers and maybe Lurkers as well. But Broodlords are the most reliable finisher. Besides Serral, I guess. Alright. So, against Zerg, we're going to have slightly different Overlord placements now. The beauty of Overlords is that you can't stop them in ZVZ. Like, the Queens can technically walk out, so we're not going to be putting the Overlords on that high ground location like we do in other matchups. Why? Well, first, I'm also going to go for a 16 pool here. This is so if he does a pull first, like a 12 pull, a drone rush, essentially, which is on the table, I will have a pull done and a queen building by the time it comes together. So that way I can fight it directly. But I will be expanding early as well. So the Overlords will cover... You can almost always cover both attack paths. Almost all maps can be covered with 2 Overlords in ZVZ. This is... Remember we tried those minimap tips? Well, this is when it comes in handy, looking at the minimap. Because having an Overlord here, and then over here, I can see if he's expanding. And I'm out of range of a queen sniping it very easily. So, getting a queen myself. Another Overlord. We see he has some Zerglings. This third Overlord is just going to go towards the middle. I'm gonna get a spine crawler. If he has Zerglings coming across the map before I have my first Zerglings out, it's not the most efficient, but until the downside of not having a second hatchery is that you just don't have as much larva. So, I do have a queen done. I'm going to wait. Control 2 on the queen. I'm going to wait. We see he's expanding, so he's not super all in. Got to bring the queen down to help defend. And we can use the Zerglings as well to help. So now I have 2 hatcheries. At 3 minutes, I'm going to get 2 gases. Let's get inject in a moment there. Just put the spine crawler towards the front. I'm moving this OV back a little bit, as is this one, because you don't need to be right at the front. You don't need to see, because he can't go out. There's no flying units until potentially Mutas, which is a long way off, even if he wants them. He has Overlord speed, though. Well, I guess I hadn't considered Overlord speed, but the Overlords can only look at each other and say mean things, as opposed to... When you don't have weapons, you use words as your weapon. Look how slow you are. I was once slow like you. Does your brood not care about you? Look at my fancy carapace. Pneumatized, or however the hell you say that. Alright. He's got a Roach Warren. I want one of those. So, Roach Warren, Evo Chambers. So this is your standard wall. You may recognize it from playing Protoss. It's designed the same way, with the spot for a queen to jam herself in. You can always put the spine or another Evo chamber behind if you feel like you really need the defense. But this is your general... I don't want you to come in here because I don't like you. Yeah, that's the extent of it. So he does have roaches, which is a little different. You don't necessarily want to wall off against roaches, but it does help to funnel them. So my roaches are going to be a little later. I'm actually going to build that Evo chamber. A hard wall, I think, will help significantly. I'm not worrying, because think about it. He expanded later. He had less drones. You know what that means? That means this roach attack is a lot of his economy. Worst case scenario, I got to kill one of my own Evo chambers. Oh no. The other downside is he potentially kills my roach horn because I can't defend it with my own roaches. That's the only real concern here. Nope. So, there are downsides to this method. You know, it's very nice of him to kill my Evo chamber. I'm gonna cancel. If an upgrade is building, and a building dies, you get the money back. Same goes with units. It's just like they were canceled from the queue, is how it works. Right click, A click. No. So you do get the money back on that. Same goes for like warp-ins for Protoss. Well, I won the fight. Just got delayed slightly on my +1, but he did open things up for me, so that was nice of him. I've got a third. I could probably A-click across, but as a matter of principle, we're going to wait till speed and +1 are finishing up. Get inject, camera locations.
No more minerals in the field.
Select all army, and then we're going to use shift queuing into eggs. Or from eggs, not into eggs. That would be a confusing process.
Finally,
Alright, speed done. +1 finishing. Gonna head across the map. Usually you don't want to move across until if you're researching speed. The speed is... There's a reason that every unit has a speed upgrade. Like, there's a reason, like, at Zerglings, Banelings, Roaches, Hydras, Lurkers, Overlords.
Mineral field exhausted.
Creep itself is a speed upgrade. Like, so it is kind of important. Ultras.
Your army mutated.
Where's the queen speed? Well, Scarlett, your queens always have speed. Unfortunately, they're just not so great at fighting Marines. When you have creep over 3/4 of the map, which is not something we're focusing on, by the way. I would like to say, if you enjoy Scarlett's play, do not do that. Creep spread is our last priority behind injects and upgrades. It does feel very unique to Zerg. But creep spread is what we're going to be filling in once we can reliably build enough units. And, alright, we came in under the 75 though. Gotta give them some credit for the solid roach count with 50. So that was, honestly a pretty typical, Zerg versus Zerg from my Metal League experience. The only thing missing was the casual Baneling nest into Slowlings with Banelings, but usually players will try some variety. If you don't really need to particularly counter what they're doing as long as you have your overlords in the right spot. That overlords, that is the biggest and most easily fixable mistake from Silver League nerds that I see. Because moving your overlord doesn't take too much. And a lot of the time I see players like roaches show up their base. Well, how did they get here so quick? Well, your overlord is in their main for some reason. And your second overlord is sitting behind yours. So that's not... Yes, we need a muta speed upgrade. We're not making any mutas. There will be no mutas. It's very sad. Maybe at like plat. Unfortunately, right now, mutas, even at the highest level, are kind of a niche surprise choice, as opposed to there is no matchup where they are reliable anything. Occasionally, they'll make their way into, well, all of the matchups, but mostly as a I bet you didn't expect this kind of strategy. And a lot of the times they don't, and then they kill the mutas anyways, because a strong gust of wind kills mutas. Anyways, the point is roaches. Roaches, the most boring, effective unit, right up until your opponent has enough larvae to get lurkers. Or, well, more like lurker-lang. But it's very hard to screw up roaches. That is why we're focusing on it. Zerg is really a whole lot of not screwing up, while repeatedly being punched in the face. So, essentially, especially in the other matchups, but also in ZVZ, your job is to, while being punched repeatedly in the face, manage to build an economy and have a solid arm. And you get used to it. So, but that is much of what Zerg boils down to. Oh, this Overlord, I'll put it out in front. I've got the first Overlord on right outside the main. The second one is looking for that sneaky other possible attack path. I'm gonna get those 2 gas geysers. We're going on 3 minutes. More drones, because I didn't see any lings come out. so... Well, that's some lings. We're gonna get a roach more in. Can I put it? And a spine crawler here. Let's see. So the counter to lings is going to be queens. Might be like, well, what is the counter to queens? More queens. Or eventually learn. Got a little supply block. Need to make sure I'm at the ramp if there are too many. But it looks like the spine crawler will be done. What is this? I'm pretty supply blocked, but we can start building roaches now. Looks like, you know how I mentioned like the slow lings plus baneling attack that we didn't get last game as the other Silver League staple? Well, it's time for the big reveal. Let's see those banelings, my friend. Oh, Zerglings.
Not acceptable. Come on.
And that's not the ideal scenario. Sit down, spine crawler. This is actually pretty bad. The spine crawler is an important part of all this. And it's dying. Of course. Usually the spine crawler isn't forced to walk around very much. But because he right-clicked on that spine crawler, it served as a good chew toy for the Zerglings at least, so. Now we're gonna go up to 40 to 44 drones. We'll take whatever sort of rounds of larva. Spines do not have more armor unburrowed. It's just only so many Zerglings can get around it. It has 2 armor base, and Zerglings attack for 5. So they're not great. So the reason sometimes it feels easier to kill spines because they're not done building. Spine crawlers that, well, all buildings have 0 armor until they finish. I don't know. There might be exceptions to that, but and then once they finish, they gain that 2 armor. They put the fancy coat of paint right at the end. Or creep. You see? It has a nice sheen to it. Somewhat sticky. But surprisingly warm as well. Okay. Alright. It's pretty creepy. What was the tech timing? Essentially, I got the lair when I realized I would defend the attack. And the Evo chamber as well. It was kind of a, how much are you committing? Because he made so many Zerglings that no matter what, I'm going to be ahead on drones. I had a hatchery quicker. And he made a bunch of Zerglings. Like, queens do not cost larva, one of their many strengths. They make larva. They're net positive larva, unlike every other Zerg unit.
Scarlett
So,
was chilling for 22
thank
months.
you. For the generous. Maybe can get some tips now. Thank you, Dex, for gifting. This is where we learn how to get bullied and eventually rank up, as is the Zerg way. Or you could try what my opponent did, which is just making Zerglings and hope they don't notice. A lot of Zerg players get to platinum essentially off of that. They pretend like they're playing a macro game when they make 80 Zerglings and then randomly attack. But, in fact, that is not the most reliable strat. And that is why you find so many of those Zergs in platinum, because they don't hit a wall until then, because the Terrans and Protoss don't know how to build one. Zergs too. Zergs also can wall off, but that's even more rare, because it feels like that's not, like, we don't do that. That's for Terrans. But, oh my god, sweet baby Jesus. Somebody call a chiropractor. I've got a spine problem. Everyone has their own method. So, spine crawler. You know what I said about Mudas? We're still not making them. We're going for Broodlords. Yet again. I'm gonna get a Hydra Den. Yes, you could argue, like, just... Because that... I bet he has half a dozen spores back there, too. I'm gonna get Overlord speed. I'm going to get an Overseer.
It should have happened.
And remember the Overlord Patrol? Let's go do that. I'm shift queuing it on the minimap. Gonna rally the drones to this base. We'll grab a chunk of them as well.
Mineral field exhausted. Back to
Start
maintenance
Hydra
farm.
upgrades, because the army is still going to be... Like, the Hydra upgrades are... Because... I think there will be, well, maybe he goes Mudas. It's possible. Let's get...
Not drop this like that.
Let's get some of those spore crawlers. So this is actually very bad. I didn't expect him to have the economy to get quite this many. I'm gonna try to run my roaches. You know what? I gotta fight.
Looks like
We gotta try to get those mutas to come back.
your forces are under attack.
I gotta punch through. And we're in the main. We're gonna split the roaches slightly.
Full power of the war. Uninvited guests come to us. Problem.
I'm super supply blocked, but the spore crawler's finished. Maybe we just target the spire. Yeah, I probably should have built. Remember how I said some Zergs forget spore crawlers in ZVZ? Yeah, I forgot Spore 20. Classic mistake. And this is what happened. If you don't remember Spore 20, bad things can happen. Even one spore crawler does ridiculous. So spores do extra damage against biological. So that means only biological air. And there's only one race that has biological air.
Someone want to see the full power
What
of
is
the
Spore 20? I mean, how do you guys not know about Spore 20? Alright, one more time. Essentially, if you don't remember spore crawlers or have a specific timing for them, you build spores at Spore 20.
Your
4
forces
minutes,
are under
20
attack.
seconds. Now, that might be a little late against a committed Terran or Protoss who is rushing an air unit. But, let's be honest here. At the Meta Leagues, they'd be lucky to get anything in your base by 5. So if you remember Spore 20, you'll at least have a spore crawler in a timely manner. What I think, I'm giving people a timing that they can remember, because I find a lot of players are like, when is the time for spore crawlers? And the answer is whenever I remember them, or if I actually physically see an air unit. So that usually means we see spore crawlers at like 3 minutes, because it's like, oh yeah, void rays. That is for the Zergs who aren't just making Zerglings. A lot of players will see a Stargate halfway done and start building spore crawlers as well. Fun fact, if a Stargate is halfway done, it can't build a void ray yet. And spore crawlers aren't particularly good against void rays, just as well. Important to note. Like, they're not really the counter, but it's better to have them than not. But if you want the actual timing, probably around 350 to 4 minutes at the higher levels is a little more reliable. But good queen positioning is the most important thing. Queens are how you actually kill air units. Spores are just for making them uncomfortable. I mean, if you don't have them, you lose all your drones. But spores are just for zoning. Once you move up a little bit. Viper's AoE spell does great versus voids. That is true. The parasitic bomb does quite well against void rays. unfortunately, the Viper requires a hive, which requires an infestation pit, which requires a lair, which requires a spawning pool. The spawning pool unlocks spore crawlers. So we're not particularly we don't see void rays and we're like, I need vipers. Usually there are some more steps to that. That's not real. That's his changeling. But why? The spawning pool also unlocks queens. Yes, correct. Thank you, Scott. Which is much more important, as we all know. Like, I have Hydras here, not by choice, but by necessity. I could have maybe gone for Corruptors to chase, but... Don't you need an Evo for spores? Psh. Look at this guy, 2,000 and late. That was changed. Legacy of the Void, or was it? You know, I don't know. Sometime. I'm not exactly sure when, but it was either with Legacy of the Void or soon after. What does the Evo Chamber even unlock nowadays? It is just upgrades, I think. It used to be for Ling drops, but Scarlett ruined that. So now we have to actually get to lair. Back when we were nerfing things when they won tournaments. Byun. The Reaper will never be the same.
Mineral field exhausted. Time to make expand and defensive.
Greater Spire. Finishing up. Rip Blue Flame Hellions. What? Blue Flame Hellions didn't get nerfed. It's just... Nowadays, going for Blue Flame doesn't really have the return on investment. Blue Flame is actually cheaper than it was. It's just Widow Mines and Liberators are much more reliable damage. Blue Flame isn't much of a priority, especially because most people don't even think about mech. Occasionally. So the reason we're kind of doing like this kind of commentary is because I couldn't kill him because he had mass spine crawler and enough mutas. And I wanted to go Broodlords, and then his mutas killed most of my drones. But I also killed most of his drones. So we had to kind of chill for a bit. I always forget the Hydra speed upgrade. Usually I think it's better to just queue up both Hydra upgrades. Let's be honest. You're probably banking the money. Like, if you're strapped for cash, maybe not, but I always forget Hydra speed. Like, over 50% of the time, I forget to get Hydra speed after range finishes. Like, I just started it, and I've had Hydras for like 5 minutes, so... The Hydra speed upgrade is important, especially off of creep. Fuck. Let's bring those Hydras home. I can't deal with that now. Abandoned ship! Alright, so he's got Hydras. What happens if you contaminate a Nidus? It doesn't stop it from unloading. Right? Control 1 on the Hydras. I think it just stops it from building more Nidus networks.
Not joke with us. Uninvited guests come to us. Problem. Evolution protest is finished. Your forces are under attack.
Okay, so when you kill the Nidus network and its subsidiary worm, the units get deleted from the universe. They're just gone. So if you have 100 supply in the Nidus, it just disappears. You can't rebuild it to get it back. But if you have either side of the connection, you still have access to it. We did it! Did we stay? Alright, 71. That was a bit... I got complacent. The mutas very much could have killed me. Honestly, I made a big mistake. And that's what I say, like, as Zerg, you gotta be ready to get punched in the face. And I just kind of got complacent, and I forgot that even though his economy was kind of bad, he could still punch me. And, well, I punched back, like, because it's ZVZ, so he deserved it. But I just kind of forgot he could, or I didn't really respect he could build units. And that is, like, at least a Spore Crawler, at the very least. Yes, this is based on SC2 replay stats. All of these numbers are at least 10 less than the average. Some of them are more. But, for example, the average Zerg APM in Silver last year was around 90. Which I thought was kind of high, but it is quite difficult. This is over hundreds of thousands of replays from just Zerg.
Will win.
150. The average is actually closer to 200. Now, okay, so I'll tell you this. There are no specific stats for each tier. And only in Diamond does I think it matters. Only in the Diamond League is when I think each tier has a distinctly different level of skill. Before that, both the MMR range and the level of skill is a lot easier to track, even if you're Silver 1 or Silver 3, for example. But yeah, so the average Diamond Leaguer might be 190, but we're starting lower and working up since the MMR range is so high. It's still, even Diamond 1 is lower than the average. But the idea is we're scaling up with the significant differences in skill. $400 APM in Diamond 1? Well, that sounds like exactly who this series is for, and also who is most likely to ignore it. Hi, Diamond Low Masters. I have twice as much APM as most of my opponents. It's like, that's not a brag, bro. Right? You're acting like it's like you're bragging, but it's bad. That's a bad thing.
Coffee break.
Dan!
Now it's time to win.
All right. For those, like, maybe this time I'll actually add the account, but my average APM is Zerg in, like, 4.5 to 5.5 KMMR. Okay, closer to 4.5 most of the time now. So, not good, but solidly high masters. Occasionally GM is 280 to 300. I'm a little on the slower side, I think. That's kind of why I feel pretty comfortable doing this series, but I'm hard-pressed to see any more than that being necessary for significantly less. And when I say slow, I don't necessarily mean in actions per minute. I mean just in the ability to accomplish different things on the map quickly. Which is not, like, the entire point of this series, of course, is, you know, if he wants to kill his own own overlord, I'm not gonna stop him. Alright. Well. He may have A-clicked a little poorly. Or he can't tell the difference. Maybe he needs colorblind mode. Or maybe it was the cat. It's unclear. The cat hates overlords. What cat doesn't? Oh, circling speed is done. I'm gonna get one spine crawler because I kind of zoned out there. We're gonna get... let's get Evo Chambers by the mineral line. Starting a lair. Is it Spore 20? Okay. So, against Zerg, it's more like... if you need spores at 420, something crazy has happened. He doesn't have a lair, so it's more like getting spores at 6 minutes or so. It's 520, which it's one of those mnemonic devices that is trying way too hard. It's just like, remember the number instead of trying to figure out a weird acronym for everything. He's going for 4th base. No, that's his 3rd base, because he doesn't have another base. That's how numbers work. 520. Why not? Alright, 520 it is. It's like Hive, but with Spore. You know, maybe I'm helping him, because that hatch is not in the right spot. That hatch is actually not just one, but I think like two grids off here. I'm just a nice guy. All right, I will help you out. The other 4th. You think he's taking this other 4th? You're a genius. You see this man? He's been watching the minimap. I've been watching him watch the minimap in order to make clever comments. But guess what? He's right. Ta-da! I like the double expand, by the way. I'm a big fan of that. Well, looks like the roaches.
Your army mutated.
How you find? Twitch chat was hacking.
Your forces are under attack.
I didn't actually notice, though I probably would have found it incidentally, though. Like... it's like, I tried this crazy strat of building 2 bases.
Finally, evolution process successful.
And I can't believe that didn't work out. This is the most bases I've ever built.
Much stronger now.
Alright, I'm queuing up the Hydra speed so I don't forget.
Now I have your attention.
Wandering Artificer is chilling for 26 months.
Thank you. We're gonna go to 70 drones to get a spore. We're not gonna get caught off guard. You know what? I'm not taking the risk. I'm confident my army's better. I'm building more spores.
Mineral field exhausted.
I'm gonna get blindsided by mutas. Is there any benefit to going bro to heal your roaches? Not for that purpose.
No more minerals in with
Also, you need the tunneling claws for the regen, not just burrow.
Someone
Burrow is a level of micro at least one order of magnitude, if not more, than we're worried about right now.
Evolution process is finished.
I mean, if you have a bunch of badly bruised roaches, you can morph them into Ravagers and they're full HP. But worrying about healing a unit that's literally called a roach. Tunneling Claws no longer grant extra regen, if I recall. Well, you recall incorrectly. It's just less than it was. It used to be enough so that 2 roaches couldn't kill a burrowed roach. Like, it could just be sitting there, and you could have detection, and it would just out-heal it. I think now it can only out-heal 1, or something like that. But Infestation Pit. So, we're gonna get to 70 drones. We're gonna max out. We're gonna start a hive. Throw those injects in.
Your brood has improved.
Get some more Overseer. So at this point, the only thing I'm particularly afraid of is lurkers. So I'm gonna get a hive. I'm gonna get a lurker done. Lurkers without the hive upgrades are pretty terrible. Like, they're not useless at all, but they are not great. We're gonna go do that Overlord mini-map action. I start the hive? Yes. Filling in roaches here. A few more overlords. Select all army for now. And the focus is going to be
Your army mutated.
on maxing out. I'm gonna try to fight. If he has too much, then I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna get Vipers and Lurkers. That's the plan.
Finally, evolution process successful.
So one more time, we'll get these injects. The hive will finish. I'm going to start the hive tech upgrades. +3, +3. We're gonna get seismic spines, lurker range.
Mineral field exhausted. Time to mate expand and defend.
Get another hatch,
Not drug
and
me
now
further.
attack. So, like I said, if he has too much or he has units I can't deal with, we'll just go back and we'll use all this. Right click once,
Your
a
forces
click.
are under attack.
What are his upgrades? He has 2-2, which is pretty good. There are the lurkers. So here's the awkward thing. I have too much supply. I want to try to... Well, first we're gonna get some overseers. The only counter to a bad guy with a bunch of lurkers is a good guy with a bunch of lurkers, and also vipers. I do have to stare at my army when lurkers are involved, unfortunately.
Should have happened. Your minerals
Alright,
exhausted.
I lost. Ow, it hurts. You hurt my feelings and my micro potential. So I start some vipers. How many drones are we at? We can build a few more. More inject. I'm gonna get adaptive talons. And you wanna know how to hack the game? Don't. Start the spores. Cancel them. I'm actually gonna get a battery pack. Consuming. I don't want to kill my own hatch too much here. Gonna do the injects. 3-3 is about to finish. Convenient timing. I have plenty of minerals. We can get more hatcheries.
Your mutation has completed.
Oh, scary. So I'm gonna start putting overseers on surveillance mode to be able to see all this.
You have exhausted all the minerals in the cluster.
Like over here.
More minerals in the field.
We're gonna burrow.
It should have happened. Your minerals is ended. You have exhausted all the minerals.
Unburrow. Move these drones over here. Shift click in so I have the larva.
No more minerals
Like,
in the field.
my overlord is literally patrolling that location. So, that is an interesting question. I don't want to fight unless I'm on the high ground with lurkers or something along those lines.
Mineral field
So,
exhausted. Time to
I'm
make
gonna
the
get a
farm.
Spire because the actual way this can end up going is Broodlords. We're gonna get Blinding Cloud. We'll start Abduct on Lurker.
Your extractor has exhausted its resources.
Is not particularly efficient, but we're gonna make sure we have enough here.
No more minerals in the field.
Control. Put a blinding cloud in the middle. What is that? Okay.
It should have happened. Your minerals is ended.
I mean, that's why I say Vipers are important. It's true. The Vipers are a defining factor. It is hard to use all these things, but that is the way to do it. And you gotta learn it, or you're just gonna start losing if people use Vipers at all. So, unfortunately, Ultras are countered by Lurkers as well. So that's what we're seeing here. Blinding Cloud. This is the kind of army I have to babysit. This is the part of the game where I try to say micro your macro. You can't look away. I'm intentionally not doing very much macro because this is one of the few scenarios where I think you just have to. It's actually kind of ridiculous how fast they barrel.
You have exhausted all the minerals in the cluster. It should have happened. Your minerals descended.
And if he wants the win, we'll give him it.
You made it. Time to celebrate victory.
From the cat to the hat. Vipers and silver, yeah. But they're needed. There is no better way. I think it's most important. So he accuses me of being a smurf. You know who does that the most? People with experience. 205 APM. Rushing lurkers. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. Now, as we know from this series, that 200 APM doesn't mean anything. But I've noticed that the people who complain the most are the ones who are projecting. Especially at this level. Like, it's the people who are maybe like Diamond with Protoss. And are now playing Zerg, but only play certain matchups. That kind of stuff. That's not 75. I failed. That's what the Vipers do. So I made an intentional effort there to show you how to control that army. Like, I intentionally did not do what my internal reflex. This entire series is about me kind of ignoring what I would usually do in favor of focusing on priorities. And I'm telling you, as soon as those Vipers come out and you're maxed out with all those upgrades, you have to just stare at it. Like, you have to watch the Vipers. It will make people think you're way better than you are. Because Vipers are one of the best units in the game. They counter everything but ghosts, pretty much. Ghosts counter everything. They are the best unit in the game. But there were no ghosts in ZVZ. So, if you're attacking, you just gotta stare at it. Of course, ideally you have the upgrades and you're maxed out, but that was a bit of an exception game, because if they do get to lurkers, you need to find a better option. What was I doing? Oh yeah, I was gifting 2 subs to the people, because we did go 7 over. So, yes, you can argue I'm hypocritical. Dan has only played 20 games, and he spent his first 10 losing them in 2 seconds. At least this season. And he's a Diamond Protoss. Oh my god. I mean, I've played this game a while, and I like to think... I like to think I know it pretty well. So... a lot of lessons born out of experience. And here's the thing, though. I will point out that when you play another race, many times it isn't consistent. Nothing about the matchmaking system is particularly consistent unless you play enough games. It will take your, initially, your MMR of your other race. So, like, for example, your Diamond is Protoss. You'll probably play Platinum and Diamond players in your placement matches for Zerg. So... a lot of players are put off by this because they're like, I thought this was a whole new thing. No, if you've played enough games as one race, it will work off of that. So it takes a little longer to kind of calibrate it. You could just roll with Lurkers and Vipers for a general strat. Lurkers and Vipers are good, but the only reason they're, I think, a priority in that scenario where he also had Lurkers. So it's kind of an impact. The problem, thank you, Quinn. The problem with going for that against, like, Protoss or Terran is they can run around you. They can run around you. They can drop. It is a lot to handle. Like, there's not a big risk of there being 50 supply of units on the other side of the map when your opponent has gone Lurker, right? The idea is it is one of the few times you can concentrate on making sure that army works. The reason you don't go for it by default in the other matchups, I mean, eventually at the higher level you do, but is because it's, even when you're concentrating, very hard to control reliably. So I want to stress that, like, that is why I was staring at it, because otherwise, like, if the Vipers just fly in and die to Hydras with one Blinding Cloud, why did I bother? A lot of players will build Vipers. Like, I built Vipers, yes, but then you select all army to over his Hydras. One Blinding Cloud doesn't cut it. I mean, it can, but... They are an incredible unit, but they do take a lot of work. We got another Zerg. The Zergs are out in force, despite their relatively low numbers in the Silver League. Of course, 5 games, anecdotally, is not defining the hundreds of thousands from SC2 replay stats last year. Or just the current statistics, believe it or not. It's like how I've gotten, when I played random, I've gotten Protoss 11 times in a row. It's like, that doesn't mean random is Protoss, it just means you haven't played enough games yet. The Zerglings are going into the main. At 3 minutes, I'm adding a Roach Warren, more Queens, and 2 gases. I'm going to shift right-click across the base. He has 1 gas. Scouts and drones. Scouts and drones. We saw more Zerglings build. I'm going to get a Spine Crawler. We're going to inject and put these Queens on the 2 key. Gonna move these Overlords out. Overlords extra important in this matchup. Give me those drones. Go on the gas. 3 more drones. Alright. I'm going to get close to the Ovi because with units that can't attack back, they immediately go in the other direction. So that's why you'll sometimes see players move their Queens, like, behind a unit or something. Because that way, the first couple seconds, it might push it towards where you want to be. Of course, if they react in time, you've lost some DPS, so... We're starting the lair. I got an Evo chamber for the +1. We're going to 44 drones after these 2 gases here. We're slowly kind of working into a consistent Roach timing. I think this is the safest way, like the kind of one of the first attacks you should learn. It's not even necessarily to be aggressive, it's just safe enough to defend any other attacks as well. Gonna get some Roaches now, and a 3rd base, as I'm getting the first Roaches. Roach speed. Get a couple injects. I'm gonna work on a little creep. Just enough, like, you want to be able to move your Queens and have vision at least just outside your base. I'll move a couple Overlords, right click, shift click. Key in the hatchery. We see he's got some Zerglings. Spive 20. He hasn't attacked me, and it's been over 5 minutes, so Spive 20 it is against Zerg.
Oh, good.
Thank you,
Now I
Basilius.
have your attention.
Basilius is chilling for 2
I
months.
hope it's not a dead
I
game.
definitely want to start playing
StarCraft
this
2
game.
has
I
as
played
many
FC and
games
FC
today
back
as
in
it
the day,
did
so I'm definitely
a
gonna
month
play
after it went
FC2
free to
now.
play.
Just hope it's not a dead game like most RDS
Despite
games
what
lately.
most people who have too much anxiety and too little self-esteem will tell you, SC2 has more players today than it did in Heart of the Swarm. Why is this? Well, because it went free to play. Also, co-op exists, but that, I mean... But statistically, it has an order of magnitude more players than both Age of Empires games people play. Well, really, only the one.
No more minerals in
For example, last season there were 200,000 people on the SC2 ladder. Age of Empires 4 has about 30k people who've played in the last few months. So, on the ladder, of course. So, like, if you think new equals good, well, let me introduce you to the game that has been so good for so long, literally no one has topped it yet. And that is just multiplayer. Of course, co-op is more popular
mineral
than
fields
ladder as well.
exhausted. Time to make expand and defensive.
That's not me just saying it. Statistically, co-op is more popular because, believe it or not, your average person is a filthy casual. I think co-op is good for learning a lot of the basic mechanics. Of course, some of the commanders are not as good because they are very different. But the entire point, like co-op originally was made, like the whole concept was because so many people played the campaign and didn't touch multiplayer. But believe it or not, based on the popularity of games like, League of Legends, it seems that people don't want to rely entirely on themselves and sit there with a social experience that amounts to locking yourself in a Buddhist monastery and meditating and hoping you don't come out an angrier person on the other side, but somehow knowing you will. Or something like that. We're attacking now because I'm angry. So yeah, what I'm saying is, even if this series doesn't inspire you to play much ladder, co-op is legitimately fun, especially some of the mutations and stuff. And of course, there's plenty of arcade games. Some of the arcade games are legitimately better than many games released nowadays. In fact, some of them have their own standalone. Heroes of the Storm was built off the SC2 engine.
Well, but you played better.
Here's a good question. What do you think it would take to make a co-op a competitive experience? So, for several years, it was announced that leaderboards were coming to co-op. I'll give you some of the behind the scenes because no one who was working on it works there anymore. Essentially, they did some testing with small groups of players. And what ended up happening was there were so many exploits and so many things. And it was generally found it ruined the experience. Because imagine if when you played co-op and you didn't do the meta build and you didn't get as high on the leaderboard because of it. It kind of defeats 95% of the purpose of co-op, which is a casual version of a more casual, less stressful version of the best real-time strategy game. So, the summary is, it's been considered and it was worked on, but it never came together because they couldn't figure out how to, one, make it so it wasn't just full of exploits because of all the various co-op commander things, which you'd actually have to balance if there was some sort of leaderboard. What came out of this, though, I'm actually going to spend a little time on co-op, which I haven't done on this account at all. What came out of this was instead of a leaderboard, and now this is barely ever used, but it's occasionally fun, is Brutal +6. you can actually add even more mutators. With you have a friend who likes StarCraft. You have a friend who really likes StarCraft and you're good at it. You and your friend are wondering how hard it could really be. You enjoy losing. You enjoy losing a lot. So this is essentially the leaderboard for co-op, but you get extra XP for leveling up, which is mostly for once you get all the masteries and that. There is a progression to it, and there's the unlimited levels, or 1,000 levels of co-op that I wish were in multiplayer as well, but... So at the end of the day, co-op, like, it has competitive modes. I'll tell you right now, the most popular co-op mode is normal. It's not brutal, it's not hard. It's just, I want to play this game that's a lot of fun to play. Especially when your heart rate and your anxiety isn't higher than opening up your email knowing you haven't looked at it for like 4 days and you probably missed something important. I think 1 or 2 more games, and then we'll be going over some of your questions and stuff. The goal was Silver 1 for today. I'm kind of debating. I like 2 hours is a little more realistic than 4. Let's be honest here. 4 hours for a video. That's... Nobody pays attention for 4 hours. Like, statistically, human beings can't pay attention for 4 hours straight. So either you watch it in multiple parts anyways, or you're just kind of tuning it, some of it out. So, that's, but as much as I think you guys like the background noise, and I need to focus a little more on the actual playing of Zerg. But as you've noticed here, Zerg comes down to finding out how they're going to try to punch you in the face. Usually taking the punch and then punching back harder. Unlike Terran or Protoss, where you're kind of a little bit more preemptive with it, as Zerg, we're... And I mean, you can take a punch. You got queens, you have larva, which allows you to be a little more flexible. In the first episode, we went over a lot of those timings, which I haven't really even touched on. But like getting to 50 drones and then going to 50 army supply, and then 70 drones and maxing out. I'm actually way late on the spawning pool here, so I don't know, but like. I want to get, like, I don't want to spend 15 minutes talking about what I'm talking about in the rest of the video, but you don't, 4-hour lectures, the few that I was awake and attended, or at least, like, I remember there were 3-hour classes, which is, yeah, no, come on, you just can't pay attention for 4 hours straight, like, it's not a thing. You should make a tutorial video on all 3 races. That is a great idea. Maybe I should even like do a series about learning the basics and just like a slow but comfortable introduction to each race, like really going over the details. I focus on like, you know, what's a smarter play as opposed to just playing faster for the sake of it. I think we'll do that. That's a good idea. So he's on 1 base. I'm going to send my Zerglings up the ramp. He's on 1 base, but if I'm just building queens, I'm going to get another Overlord here. Get those queens. Queue up 2 more queens. Start 2 gases. I'm going to hotkey these queens onto 2. Shift 2. And now I have 2 queens. What's up here? 4 Marines. So, that tells me nothing. I'm gonna shift click, or actually right click patrol. And so, I know nothing right now. He didn't even have a reactor. Well, I know he doesn't have the expansion here. He doesn't have a reactor. So, that is very little more than nothing. Gonna start a roach warren now, too. Partially because I'm supply block, but partially because I expect... My default expectation is a battlecruiser rush. He has a tank, but that doesn't necessarily preclude the battlecruiser. Hide. I hold position. Alright. There we go. Did he... Spore 20! And on this base, I'm gonna get Overlord speed. Because if he's gonna spend a scan on that, the least I could do is OV speed now. Get an Evo chamber. So, we'll build a few roaches here. I've already queued up an overload. It'll get there. It's a slow V for now, but... Start my +1 attack, ranged attack. Gonna rally to the natural. I got 6 queens. 6 queens. Solid baseline. That's enough to kill a battle cruiser. Now, of course, it can't always kill them, but at least strongly suggest that battlecruiser leaves, which is sometimes the most you can do. But it's better than nothing. Alright. What do we have here? There it is. The fusion core. We're gonna get a spire, and we're not gonna put it at the corner of the base because that is where the battle cruisers live. Exhibit battle cruiser.
Not acceptable command.
So he jumped out of my vision to the very back, is what happened. And that's why I didn't see it. Very clever. Micro. So he definitely jumped. Wait, can... Okay. Don't do this. Don't try this at home. I'm building 2 Ravagers. I probably should have done that to start. But I'm building 2 Ravagers because that's the only thing I can access right now that has more range than the Queens. If he wasn't so close to dead... Wait, was that another jump?
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Like
I'm getting, well, some more overlords first. We're gonna get the double upgrades and some corruptor ups. So this is what I mean by getting punched in the face. This is essentially most of the Zerg experience here. Right click, A click, right click, A click, right click, A click, right click, A click. The Brenda dance. Slow and steady. Partially because I need to make sure all the queens are in range, otherwise they'll get in the way of each other. They have a tendency to not really care about personal space. A lot of Zerg units have that issue, so... I'm going to transfuse a few times. Let's get that Overlord patrolling those bases. I do like that tip. It's a good tip. I might even start adding it in to my higher level games. Honestly, getting Overlord speed by the time your lair tech kicks in, so like 6 or 7 minutes, is usually a pretty good timing. Uh-oh. Transfuse. Sir, please don't. Against low amounts of units, the queen efficiency is top-notch. It's only with the much higher DPS armies that they become less of a great option. But obviously, a dozen Marines and a couple tanks are not that late-game army.
Mutated.
We're gonna get the infestation pit, a Hydra den. So how many drones do I have? Let's get one more round. Put them over here. Alright, right click, shift, 1, 2, 3. Right click. He's expanding. He's building more Rex. So, that means let's queue up those Hydra upgrades. Start the hive. And you see the trend we're getting into. Gonna build enough more overlords now. Get a few overseers. Some gas. Start some hydras. Get a lurker den. Queue up some inject. Take the base. Yes. A lot of housekeeping. Spore spawn setup. Get some drones over there. A bunch of roaches. Select all army. Yep. I'm always annoyed by this. For some reason, this part of Curious Minds, you can't creep spread. It's just creep phobic. I built a lot of corruptors. Okay. And I could go broodlords. Alright, so here's what we're gonna do though. We're gonna add in those vipers. Because we know he wants to turtle, right? I'm gonna get 4 vipers. We're gonna have 2 armies, or 2 control groups. I'm just putting the corruptors with the rest of my units, because controlling them separately is hard. And kind of, hopefully, unnecessary. So, we're gonna start the +3 upgrades. We're gonna put 2 out of 3. Why is it that when you go slightly over in minerals, I guess when you have less, it should be like red when you have less than 3 as well. Whatever. Alright. So we're gonna just taste all these buildings and then shift Q, because consume will only get about 70 energy. It doesn't actually go till full energy. This is partially to prevent you from killing your own buildings, but it's just like a timed ability. So you shift Q it to be able to get more.
Your brood has improved.
I'm also going to start the Greater Spire. Maybe the Lurker Ben wasn't the top priority unit or building. But, so now we have the army. 13 minutes. We got Vipers. We got all the tech. And we got attacked by a battle cruiser. So if you can aim for 15 minutes with 4 Vipers and then a solid ground army, you're well on your way, I think. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. Control Shift 3. You know what? Alt 3.
Good.
I'm going to
Now
steal
I have your attention.
the corruptors from the main control group with the Alt key.
20 months. Winter.
That's the plan. Oh, wow. He dodged me.
Your fortress is under attack.
And now my Vipers are on the wrong side. But obviously, just because you can fly around in medevacs. I wasn't sure if he was actually in the medevacs, but then... Oh, okay. So... Yeah. We went over again! 83. I definitely... Well, I was... winding up to the low APM attack, but he kind of attacked me, which really threw that all off. Now, an important note, he only built 44 workers, and you start with 12. That does count, by the way. We do count those 12. So... with 44 workers total, obviously the focus on building more workers is part of the key. Now, as Zerg, your worker count is usually somewhat artificially inflated. That is because, remember, every building needs to be a drone, right? Every building. At the end of the day. That means you're killing... This is why Spore 20 and Spive 20 are so important. Because you don't want to kill your drones too quickly. A lot of people will see units they need to defend and jump right towards static defense. Let's be honest. Queens are effectively static defense. They just move slightly faster than Spores. Actually, I'm pretty sure Queens move slower than Spores. Oh, it's my good friend Dan.
Oh, good. Now I have your attention.
Let's give him what he wants.
Is chilling for
Our Diamond
months.
Pro Toss.
That's like some
Also,
28
we
months.
played enough CVC, so we'll let Dan have this one. Give him a taste of victory. Yeah. Oh, Dan. Who's Dan? If you don't remember from before. Oh, yeah. So, wow. How did we get here? So, this is why we can't trust a lot of the APMs from Bronze and Masters. Because this silver-ish player was in Masters. I didn't change. But that is an example of what it looks like. And it is quite annoying. It's kind of demoralizing as well. Because some people don't understand it, and some people do, and all of them are upset. But I think we'll look at one of the questions. We'll start it off. What is the first question from the first episode of the Zerg Low APM Challenge? This helps so much. I'm only playing against the AI. Lurkers and Dropper Lords are so fun. Rip A-move infestors. Okay, so A-move infestors never were a thing. They've never been a thing you could do, unless I'm misreading what that means. But they were better, so maybe that's what he means. But Lurkers and Dropper Lords, they are fun. But might I suggest Vipers, Tytar? Good luck out there. That wasn't a question, Jimmy. In what composition would you use mutas? Oh, it's like Jimmy included the response, which is accurate. Mutas are expensive and require a lot of control. Something like 4 Widow Mines can destroy the flock and lose you the game. There are some very niche scenarios. Like, for example, if a Protoss player is building robo units, a Terran, like sometimes you can sneak a muta switch. Honestly, most of the time at the lower levels, it's more reliable to go to Hive and get Vipers as opposed to trying to control mutas. But mutas are a lot of fun until 4 Widow Mines kill your entire flock. So, that is true. Oh, Dan. We found him again so quick. Ruining it. Dan might not know. Wait. Did Dan get a game in? Otherwise, we may have to make sure that Dan has to find us of his own accord. Yeah, he waited several minutes before finding another game. Oh, Dan. Oh, Dan. Oh, Dan. Play Dan? We played Dan. The Dan story ends here, though. We do have more questions. That is. Huge fan of the series. Thank you, Alex. First one inspired me to get back into StarCraft. Currently a low diamond, advanced platinum. Struggling hard to compete with Terrans. That is a good question that we will be answering after this Dan-free game. But we will be answering the questions and the chat questions as we, after a few more games. But I'm feeling like sometimes I feel like it's time to take a break. I don't think so. Just keep playing. Usually it's between 2 and 3 hours, like when I'm laddering, that I find myself after 2 to 3 hours, which is usually 10 or so games, that I start feeling like kind of strung out a little. Like my brain is not registering what I'm trying to do nearly as well, and I need to just kind of refresh. Of course, it's a little different with what we're doing now, which is more trying to make sure I have some productive commentary, but we're getting close. Because who would want to listen if I don't have anything to say? Yeah, when you used to grind like 12 hours a day, well, I still did the same thing. What I would do is I would play like 10, 15 games, probably closer to 15. I'd take a break, watch a stream, a video or something for like an hour. And then come back, play some more. Like, all right. So it looks like we got a good Protoss friend here. Let's see. Does he have a second pylon? I've started my pool. He did lose the probe. And he does now have... Oh, here's another probe. All right. So we are going to bring some more drones. If he hadn't had the second probe, we wouldn't do that, but... we kill the probe. We do kill the problem. That is a key point. 4 drones is the number, but I brought more because I expected to have to kill the cannons. So I'm just gonna keep these down here. I'm gonna have Zerglings now. We're gonna start the queen now. If you just click the hatchery keys, it'll sometimes start the queen on the wrong base. So I manually clicked on the. And this is why your second Overlord hangs out at your natural against Protoss, by the way. For exactly this reason. Because usually that's where the most shenanigans are afoot. Well, probes don't have feet, but you got the idea. Usually my normal method is 2 on each probe, 2 drones. It's a little inefficient if they have really good micro, but a lot of the time they're going to panic, and they might screw it up. And then if a cannon goes down, at least 4 drones on it. 4 drones will kill it before it finishes. And the Overlord goes at the natural, so you can see it before it becomes a big issue. So, we saw a probe go out with the Overlord. And it didn't show up at my base, so that doesn't leave a whole lot of options. And there you go. That is, well, I mean, you can't get too much more, Oh, hello, Max Packs. So, yeah. Sometimes you'll find those players. The thing is, if those cannon rushers, either one, were particularly good at it, or two, had any sort of real follow-up, they probably wouldn't be in gold. So, just make sure you don't underestimate it, but also don't pull all the drones immediately. It's usually not necessary. There's a few scenarios where you might need to, and that's if they actually know how to do the cannon rush. So how do you know that? It's the triple pylon, either behind the mineral line or at the ramp. Those are the scenarios where you have to take drastic action. Because it's a huge commitment, but also it's very hard to deal with if the cannons start. So I would say if you notice them putting up the triple pylon block, you're probably going to need most of your drones, or you're going to give up that base. Those are your options. Otherwise, if it's just kind of the half-hearted, I built a pylon and I hope you don't see it, totally not a pylon. I'm totally not. This probe is not suspicious at all. This probe is not one of the many, many probes that have hurt you in the past. It's a completely different probe. That pylon, that's not even mine. All right, it was here when I got here. It's a friend's. So essentially, that is the majority of Protoss at this level. So you shut it down, and all you got to do is make sure you don't lose all your drones. So, I'm not sure if we played this. It's another ZVZ. A lot of ZVZ. I was kind of hoping we get a few more Protoss, like non-cannon rush Protoss. I think we've only had one or two. But the Zerg's out in force. So, first Overlord. Is there a hatchery? Yes. A little later than my hatch. So that means, obviously, well, not obviously, but very probably a spawning pool quicker. But not so quick that it precludes getting a hatchery. I would have already seen the Zerglings coming out unless they were particularly sneaky with the Overlord. Or in moving the Zerglings around to avoid the Overlord to be more accurate. But it is hard to time that out. And especially at this level, since Overlords are not consistent. Like, I'm showing you the best Overlord pathing. But, like you see by the Overlord in my friend here's main. There's an Overlord in my main. You know what that Overlord doesn't see? If Zerglings are coming out of the base. So if I happen to make, like, a few dozen Zerglings, this is how a lot of games are lost almost for free. What happens is your Overlords are in the wrong spot. They don't move that fast. Like, you got plenty of time. In fact, they are the slowest unit in the game. So,
new subscriber detected.
The Overlords can always be in the right spot, at least to start in CVZ. You can always get an idea of if there's a huge amount of Zerglings coming out with the Ovies. So, if they're not in the right spot, and you die because of it, that is one of the most fixable, yet painful mistakes. So I've gotten the gas in about 3 minutes. As the gas finishes, we're starting the Roach Warren. We saw his base. The Zerglings are mostly for scouting, unless there's no defense. So if there's no defense, then okay, I'll attack a few drones. But
is chilling for 31 months.
thank
I
you,
should have
Maddox.
been a Katowice correspondent, but ESL Street casted me into translator, so shame on that XD.
You were Oh, is that... Too many Korean... Thankfully. When are we going to region lock Europe, by the way? That's the question. It's unfair to the rest of the world that Europe gets to participate in the same tournaments. Roach Warren is done. build a few roaches because we do see the Zerglings coming across the map. Run away! He really does want that queen. He may get it. He does not. We're gonna start the lair. Oh, I made a mistake. I didn't notice he took the third. I see the creep now. But I actually, I got so used to players taking the other third. I mean, what would I do different? Probably very little. Because the Zerglings already scouted. He was going for Zerglings, and he had a Baneling nest, so I had to respect that. But I feel a little safer getting my third now. I kind of suck. It's okay that I spawn at least 2 queens per hatch? No. You want as many as possible, and 2 is like
This one is
nearly
showing
the
for
minimum.
18 months. Wow, 3 years already. Thanks so much.
My
Winter,
general
for all the
rule
StarCraft
that
and other
I'm
games.
using now is
Love will happen too,
6
especially
extra
Zerg
queens
smile
by 8
at How
minutes.
I would have made it at my last job without.
Oh my god, they shut him down. But, thank you. But, 6 queens by 8 minutes. Usually ZVZ you're gonna have the least. And they're the least useful, I guess. Like, you don't use queens for everything in ZVZ because Zerg units don't need it as much. But it's good to get in the habit. Queens are the best unit you have as Zerg. Especially against Terran and Protoss, who will usually, because they're too afraid to use their legs and walk on the ground, will either try some air-based shenanigans or at least something like drops. So, queens kind of both in creep, in the fact that they generate rather than take larvae, and their anti-air are your best choice against almost everything that can be thrown at you that isn't a mass of ground units. Their largest weakness are things like mass marine, Zergling, Charizlots, but that is a minority of the time you face that. Because that's countered by things like Roach Hydra, which pretty easily can deal with those. Oh my god, I completely missed 520. We're gonna get both Hydra upgrades. And Overseer across. Because he hasn't done anything for a while. Like, he got a few Zerglings, but that doesn't mean anything in particular. Oh, we see roaches. Any upgrades? Nothing. Oh no, queens! To the third! You might have an overlord spotting this. More transfuse. Did I get roach speed? I did. Very important. Essentially, all the speed upgrades you can get, you want to get, unless there are range upgrades. You might be like, well, how many examples of this are there? Well, Hydras and Lurkers both have range and speed upgrades, and the range upgrade is the first priority. But everything else, like you're building a bunch of roaches, you get speed as soon as possible. Zergling, if you're actually going for a bunch of Zerglings, speed as soon as possible. Banelings, which I don't recommend right now, at this level, speed as soon as possible. In fact, did you know the Baneling speed upgrade increases their HP by 5? Not just makes them faster. Yeah, that is kind of important, especially against things like Marines and tanks. Fun fact. And that is why you'll see in many games at the top level, players will, even before their actual basic upgrades, like melee attack, why players will go for Baneling speed first. Obviously, against like Clem or something, you're not gonna... Slow Banelings might as well not exist, but also because not only the speed, but the actual HP. So you got the double whammy going on there. It's like combat shields. Alright, let's go get Patrol Ovies. I should have done that earlier. I mean, these are all things you want to do as soon as possible. And even if you forget for a little while, they're almost never bad to do. Zerg isn't so reliant on the super sharp timings as it is on just eventually building up the right tools. Like Protoss, you can't just build Colossi and then decide you'll build other units. Zerg, on the other hand, you can just kind of fill things in, and everything gives you a similar amount of... Like, Lurkers are very good, but with no other units, on their own, they're okay. Like, Vipers are going to help, too. Plenty of Roaches and Hydras, like, they're all good. The order matters a little bit, because you can only build Roaches to start, but... Sir? Oh, he's got some Mutas as well. This is a Wendy's. Does Roach Speed help Ravagers? It does not. Ravagers are already pretty quick units. Okay, I guess I'm attacking then. Looks like he's going to try to base trade. We're going to bring the Queens to this base. I'm going to get the range upgrade here. Yeah, a lot of players will fear confrontation. This is why like a solid third of the game sent in the Bronze League heroes are nothing happening and then a base trade that ends in 3 minutes. Is because, as we've seen from the expansion patterns, like taking hidden bases, just essentially trying to run around rather than fight units. If you simply are confident enough to take a fight, that puts you in the minority. And it puts you ahead of the rest. Because building an army and being willing to fight with it is actually quite rare. That's why you saw like the Terran player who went for the drops, the Protoss who was trying to hide a Nexus, stuff like that. I think we might have gone a little over there. I was doing a lot of like transfuse micro. If only I had let the queen die. If only. She should have died. For those who don't know, the goal is 75. I definitely struggled the most as Zerg. Because the amount of just macro actions, I guarantee you 200 of Serral's APM has nothing to do with the stuff you ever see on the screen. Injects, creep spread, overlords, just general unit production, upgrades, just all that housekeeping stuff, essentially. Zerg has the most of it, but they do, in contrast, have mostly the simplest army micro.
Now I have your attention.
Where it comes down more to sending it a certain direction than exactly how you control it. There are obviously exceptions to that, but like it's not like Marines or Blink Stalkers a lot of the time. Instead, it is you built the right army. Now go send it somewhere it's not gonna all die to splash damage immediately. And if it is, maybe try Vipers. Alright. Do you do Overlord or Drone first? Need a better build. I'll actually give you the exact build. Here's a very easy to remember. All the gaps are filled in by drones, by the way. 13 Overlords. So 1 drone, 1 Overlord. 14 drone. Overlord pops. 3 more drones. You're now at 17 supply. Okay. Hatchery. 1 more drone. Spawning pool. So, 17. First Overlord to their base. Second Overlord protects yours. Except against Zerg, where you send it out too. Is this another Zerg? Yes. Booty chowder. So, a golden Zerg. Anyways, so I'm showing you the 17-17. I'm not getting gas till 3 minutes. The idea is we're not... The reason you see players get gas so early is usually for Zergling speed. And Zergling speed is for people who can control Zerglings with speed. I know, it sounds crazy. But getting upgrades for the sake of it, I'm doing whatever I can to try to keep you guys from building Zerglings too fast. As lovable as Zerglings are, okay? One of the largest, like, one of the most universal mistakes that any of the races make in the Meta Leagues is Zerglings. Zerglings are just not very, I know, good. Zerglings almost entirely rely on your opponent making a mistake, as opposed to you being able to use them in any sort of particularly skilled manner. Because they're ground units at melee range. There's a lot of obvious counters to them in the earlier game. The reason they're so popular is at the higher levels are obviously because when you have 200 APM to micro Zerglings, well then, okay, make your Zerglings, Reynor. Like, but just the sheer... And they're very larva ineffective. They're larva inefficient. And remember, we learn to respect our larva. When you make Zerglings, and then you just kind of throw them away, or you don't use them, and they just sit around, you're not respecting your larva. Those queens worked hard for it. The queens you built. Oh wait, you were microing your Zerglings? This is an angry coach. But if it was... I'd have some commentary. Speaking of Zerglings... Alright, I'm gonna get a spine crawler. The rest of the drones are gonna hide. We're gonna get more queens and more Zerglings. I'm actually gonna build an Evo chamber to wall this off. These Zerglings are just gonna sit there. So, I have my queens on hold position. So what's the worst case scenario? We saw a bunch of Zerglings, right? Even if, like, this blocks my mining, I can just kill it with the spine. So. The worst case scenario. Best case scenario is I kill all his Zerglings and he does nothing. Those were slow lanes, actually. So. He just built a bunch of Zerglings. Thank you, Booty Chowder, for showing us exactly what I meant. Which is, a lot of players will just build Zerglings, and that's the entire plan. And they're used to that being, like, both the beginning and the end of the strategy. Rest in pieces. Evolution Chamber. And that we're just skipping that entire point. Rip Broodlings. Looks like he made some more Zerglings. As I said, the beginning and the end of the entire strategy. But I have hopefully enough queens now. Because remember, when we're not building Zerglings, we're building queens. Let's get this gas. Right click, shift 1, 2, 3. Right click, shift 1, 2, 3. And queens are the best unit you have. The more you have, the better they get. Transfuse. More creep. More injects. Why aren't you walling off? Well, I considered it, but I've already built a roach one. I was pretty confident that I now have enough queens, essentially. Before, I didn't wall off at the front because my creep wasn't even there yet. Like, with the really early Zergling attacks, you don't really have enough units to actually defend. With later Zergling attacks, like, if he had saved up all these plus the first lings, I would have walled off. Because that would have been so many lings that the queens don't... It's just not enough. But because I already have 5 or 6 queens, I don't need to box myself in. Though, like, I could. It definitely would be... Like, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad move. It just... I didn't. And it should be fine. You get diminishing returns for workers after 16, you still get a benefit? Yes, you get a benefit up to 24 workers, but after about 20 it starts dropping off. But it is still better to mine up to 24 workers before you'd be better off long distance mining. Because it has to do with how long it takes exactly to mine each mineral patch on average and all that. So I'd say once you start getting over 20 on a base, well, that's when either you want to expand, or consider transferring, or both. But don't have a panic attack just because it turns red for a second. So essentially 1/3 more than the counter. That's because about 2.5 drones can mine each mineral patch, with there being no downtime. 2 drones is always efficient. There's no downtime. They're 100% efficient. But a 3rd drone can get in on the action. It just, there are sometimes units that, or some of the drones will kind of sit there being like, really, bro? But you still do get more mining from it. Alright, so you had 1 Hydra, which is, something. The 1 Hydra timing. What is this, like a cutscene? Hydras seem a lot scarier in the cutscenes. I think he had like another one back there. So I'm also going for the Roach Hydra. I'm confident I have a better economy. Ah.
Mineral field exhausted. Your forces are under attack.
More Hydras. Fight me! Ah, lurkers. So this is a lurker rush. That's pretty crazy. So we gotta bring the units in. I'm getting overseers. There's no way he has the hive tech upgrades, obviously, but like, did you know queens aren't armored, so they don't actually take that much damage to lurkers? They're good at everything. Except maybe Mass Zergling. Oh, speaking of. I mean... okay. I'm gonna get OV speed. I'm gonna go check for a 3rd. Oh, he's got some roaches here. I mean, he's got a couple more. Don't just chase! Okay, so I dove on the lurkers, which was dumb. I killed one, but... we're gonna go patrol. The worst thing you can do is actually give them what they want, which is fighting into them. I mean... watch the grand finals. It can turn very quick. You're like, actually, that's not a good example. Reynor's like, I don't need lurkers to fight you. I mean, you do, but somehow he didn't. Still wrong. But like, but Reynor does not. Does that sound like a reliable thing to? Alright, lurker den. Oh, hello, lunkers. on the bright side, until he gets the hive tech upgrades,
Your brood has improved.
they're easy enough to kill. Like, you don't want to fight into an entrenched position, but if they rushed lurkers, you should have an army that can move around. Get a little creep here. Because they spent a lot of their money, you know, on lurkers.
Your army mutated.
I only have 55 drones, which is not enough. I'm gonna get a couple Vipers now. They're 200 gas, which is not cheap.
Your minerals is ended. No more minerals.
Those patroller lords are really helping out. Honestly, not just for mini-map awareness, for literally scouting. Those patroller lords have paid off so much. Just patrolling around the corner bases. And patrolling 3 bases in the corner is like half the bases on the map. You get 2 of those, you've now covered half the map. The half you're probably not usually looking at. So... remember, well, this is, once again, I want to make sure I have everything I need. I'm going to rally here with the drones, which is upgrades. I'm going to queue up both lurker upgrades, because what I want to do, I'm going to have to stare at the army. This is the micro army. Be prepared, we're doing a micros. I know I tell you to focus on your macro, but that's what we're trying to do now, is build a micro army after I've essentially completed my macro. So I'm gonna queue up some injects. I'm gonna add a handful more drones. At least a few lurker.
Evolution process successful.
More base.
You have exhausted all the minerals.
So, what am I looking for? Upgrades. Upgrades, drone count, hatcheries, and larvae. Once I get all that, then it's micro time. We're no longer focused on hitting that 200 supply timing, but making sure I have a buffer, so that way, if I'm busy fighting, I can at least fall back and have the ability to produce here. So I have the Vipers on 3, my army on 1. I'm going to control click or just press R to bro the lurkers. I have the overseers with both of these things.
Evolution process is finished.
Oh.
Your forces are under attack.
Mutas? Oh, thankfully we have clean still.
Mineral field exhausted. Time to make expand and defend. Uninvited guests come to us. Open. No joke with the Zerg.
Okay, I
You
can
have
move up.
exhausted all the minerals in the cluster. Your army mutated.
Good thing we built those spores earlier.
Need hold this attack.
Spores easily kill mutas. Like, if it's less than 10 mutas, the spores will kill them. I just didn't have one at the outlying base. He's microing his mutas while I kill him. Whoop! He's got a couple lurkers, but... Abduct. Abduct. If there's more than 1 or 2, usually Blinding Cloud is good. Like, honestly, if it's just a single lurker, abduct. If it's more than 1... Spores don't deal splash damage. They only take like 3 or 4 hits to kill a muta, though. Like, it's just very cost ineffective. And they have more range. The mutas, if they want to fight the spore, are already taking a lot. So I want to show you why you don't build the Zerglings in the early game. So essentially, this is his build right now. My good friend Booty Chowder. He's at 14 drones. Spores are armored. All buildings are armored, but that is irrelevant to the mutas. So, this is the kind of thing you can expect. He forgot to build Zergling speed. If you're going to go for early Zerglings, Zergling speed is important. This is why I'm giving you guys just a basic build. He's building a spine crawler, and he built a bunch of Zerglings, and he forgot speed. So, just baseline roaches, 3 minutes on gas, 330 on that roach horn, and queens. Queens. That's the summary. Queens are the most important thing. Now this is exactly what I yell at people on Angry Coach for, because this is the normal reflex of a player who loses a bunch of Zerglings, is now I'll make more Zerglings. And as you can see, we're 3 minutes into the game, down 10 drones. And counting. So that is the sort of habit that a lot of players kind of get sucked into. And it's definitely one you want to break. Like we broke in the silver. But, oh wow. I'm really ruining it. Zerg is so hard. Yes, you can feel accomplished Zerg player. 93! Ah! Oh no. I kind of got carried away. It is very hard to, because I played Zerg the most over the years. Probably not by a huge margin, but it was my main for a while. There's a lot of habits that I've built up that I don't even think about, like injecting creep spread, overlord spread. It's a lot of things. The idea is you never think about it. You play enough that you never think about it. Oh, God. And the longer the game goes on as Zerg, the more, like, just building units, like building 50 roaches. You've already done all that. Building units in general is more APM for Zerg because you have to select the hatch and then select the larva and then select the unit. And if you want to build a different unit, you have to go back, select the larva again, build a different unit. So, like, it is part of it. But we are going off, that was actually above the average APM for Zerg players in last year on SC2 replay stats. So, I will say. I thought I had a spreadsheet for that, but moving on. Why doesn't Zerg have all larva hotkey? You can hotkey your hatcheries. I think it makes sense. The all warp gate hotkey is a little weird, but it's a very different mechanic because it can be anywhere on the map. Your larva is always near a hatchery. You can't, like, warp in larva out of an overlord. So, if you hotkey a larva, it will hotkey all larva. Yeah, but you gotta do it each time. There's no, like, quick way around it on that. But we made it to Silver 1. The Zerg is a struggle. I will say, like, I do feel a little bad, but I don't feel like I'm playing any faster than I was as Terran of Protoss. Like, not in the sense of progressing the game. In fact, I feel like I'm slowing myself down and the game down a lot more as Zerg, because there's so much to do. The Terrans and the Protoss can focus on their silly build orders and their strong units, but here with the Zerg, you just gotta know how to take a punch. So I'm gonna spend this time, and if you made it this far and you're about to tune out, like and subscribe, and check out more. Although, like, if you do have questions, and this is for those watching live as well, I am attempting to gather some of those questions for each episode of that race and focusing on that. So if you want your question answered, and you might not happen to be watching live like a vampire, well, we got a few from the first episode here. I already answered a couple of them, but we got more. questions and comments. So, we were on Alex's question. Here is mine. I'm struggling hard to compete with Terrence. I mostly got diamond by macroing the Roach Hider, but it's not working nearly as good. Should I try to switch to Hydraling Bane or just keep refining? So, yes. The summary is yes. If you're in diamond, I think at least attempting Hydraling Bane, but the key is still Vipers. I'm starting Vipers off early. I think it's something, and this is a big difference from my old low APM challenge, where I pretty much tried to avoid using spellcasters at all. I think it's more important to learn how to use basic abilities rather than trying to work around it. It is hard. It is different than just clicking select all army. But it is necessary. Or at least it makes your life a lot easier. So I recommend trying to get a hive. We're talking about diamond or advanced platinum, so probably not far into diamond. Trying to get a hive before 10 minutes. So like starting it by about 9 minutes, which is realistic in most games. And then the first thing that comes out of that hive are Vipers and or Lurker upgrades. And I think against most Terrans of that level, if you actually use one of the two, they'll call you a Smurf. Because Terran players are used to having a monopoly on feeling like they can micro. And when a Zerg does it, that offends their very fragile sensibilities. So make sure to do that. So, thanks to these guys. Now I can pretend to my wife that I know what is happening during pro-level matches. At least she'll now be even, after she's been pretending for years. You mentioned Serral and the Select All Queen command. How does one do that? So, that is kind of a play on the fact that Serral is so fast. There is no Select All Queen command. You just have to manually hotkey it in. But what I do is I put it on the 2 key. Like, I have the control group 2 is for queens. That's what it's for. That's what it does. Every queen that I'm not going to use for inject, it goes on the second control group. So just getting in the habit of that, and that way you have it when you need it, as opposed to panicking and needing it later. So, is it possible to weaponize the creep? I refer you to Scarlett versus Clem from I Am Katowice. Check out that series if you'd like to know how to weaponize creep. You just trailed off when you explained why and when you were looking at the minimap. So, I actually was thinking about this when I was doing the Patroller Lords. I hope I explained and showed enough of why that's valuable in this episode. But that was actually kind of in reference. A couple people mentioned things like this, not necessarily just for Zerg, but in general. And I think having that corner patrol is a good way to both train looking at the minimap and reveal all those bases you never knew existed. Hey, Winter, if you're reading this, one thing I've been struggling with is early Hellions, or maybe they aren't early, getting into my mineral lands and causing me to panic. Is the answer just more queens? Queens and overlords in the right spot. That first overlord goes to the pervert pillar, the second one goes outside your third, and the third one goes outside your natural. So this way, hopefully you have a little more than 0 seconds of warning. The other goal is just continually building queens on everything that isn't building a lair, until you have 8 or 10 of them. So, but both having more warning, setting yourself up to have an early warning system, and then, of course, the queens to slap it down. But you're in the right direction. Thank you, Grant. Andre says, your APM is not low APM. Most people's low APM are comprised of only the right clocks. You are barely doing any right clicks. Fair. Austin mentions that choose AI or ability target for global players. Oh, I may have glossed over what rapid fire hotkeys are. But yes, rapid fire hotkeys are when you bind one of the keyboard keys to choose AI or ability target, which repeats that ability wherever your mouse is. You do have to go into your hotkeys document in your documents on your PC, and you can add a comma, like Austin describes here, with whatever other keys. You could technically have your entire keyboard be rapid fire, if you'd like. Not a good idea. That probably has implications that you might not like. But that's how players have multiple. Because in the game, it allows you to have 2 things for one hotkey, which is already twice as many as your average game does, but you can actually have your entire keyboard do one command, if you'd really like. Probably not a good idea, but have fun with it. I have a question. You will hopefully answer in the next Zerg APM episode. All right, Tempest. I remember a guide. You made a few. We're all over the place. You demonstrated that ZVZ is best handled with smart Baneling pushes. I may have made like a higher level Baneling guide. That sounds like something I would do. What has changed to adjust your lesson away from Banelings in favor of Roach Hydra? It is kind of a knowing your level and priorities thing. It isn't necessarily that Lingbane is bad. It's that Roach Hydra has a lot less opportunity to fail. The potential of Roach Hydra is lower than Lingbane. But the chance of failure and the amount of prioritization it requires is also much lower. Like, maybe Roaches, like, their potential is a 7, but they only require 2 micro. Whereas Lingbane, their potential might be a 9, but they require like 7 micro to get there. And we're just not there. So Roach Hydra, with Vipers, importantly in the later game, is much easier to get a handle on. But like our Advanced Platinum friend, at some point you do. The Lings and Banes are usually the better late game, because Roaches suck. Hydras are good as placeholders for Lurkers. But at the lower levels, I've always, at least over the last couple 8 low APM challenges, recommended Roach Hydra. But I am focusing more on the Vipers, because that should cover many of the weak points players have. Like, the issue that I think a lot of low-level players have when they do finally learn how to macro is they still don't know how to fight. You might max out, but there will be those siege tank generals and those void ray enthusiasts who are just sitting there behind a wall of static defense saying, "Come at me, bro." And that's why we're trying to get a handle on the Viper. So that way, when you eventually get to the higher levels, you now have a little bit of experience. Because you might not need the Vipers right now. This is what we're trying to do with like getting Vikings as Terran. And then as Protoss, as I was demonstrating, the 1-2, which isn't necessarily like for Terran and Zerg, we're focusing on using an extra set of units. For Protoss, we're focusing on doing 2 attacks at once. But these are both things that you don't need in the Silver or really the Gold League. You'll get by just fine. But having any experience will help you. The goal of this whole series, and just side note, I almost didn't recognize because it was not even a single red arrow. I will try to make sure I fix that. I'm sorry, Christian. I hope you don't miss out again. For Christian. I'll work on it. But the goal of the series is not to just speed run through the leagues. It's to reliably get you to, honestly, we're looking at Diamond. I think everyone with a little bit of application, maybe not instantly, maybe not in a month, but I think with a few hundred games, most players can reliably get at least close to Diamond. A lot of players end up playing dozens of games without learning anything because they learned one build and it works sometimes, but then they go on a bad streak and it just doesn't work out, or they have a bad matchup. And since they only learned like this one build, they feel like they can't do any other builds. And then that build got them to Platinum, and now they're stuck in Platinum, and they don't know any other builds. And when they try anything else, it just fails horribly. So they go back, and that one build wins about 50% of the time, so the matchmaking system works. That build just isn't that good against relatively high-level players who've seen that build because they did watch Harstom's video on it, and they actually understand how to counter it, because all you have to do is outlast the 10 minutes that the build is, because there's no follow-up, because now they're 500 MMR higher than they ever would have been without doing that one build they copy-pasted. So the idea here is to give people the tools to actually work their way up, as opposed to just hand them. Like they say, if you give a man a build, he'll get to platinum. If you teach a man to build,
like 300 foxes
probably
to chilling
diamond.
for 32 months.
So
Soup.
I hope you've enjoyed the low APM challenge. The second episode of Zerg. Thank you for the questions, and I look forward to more questions and comments. Good luck. Have fun. Have an amazing day. I hope I made your day and your games a little bit better. Thank you for watching. Stay chill.